In the early centuries of Christianity, long before the establishment of grand cathedrals and the institutional church, a distinct form of devotion began to emerge in the remote regions of the Roman Empire. This was the world of the early Christian ascetics, men and women who chose lives of extreme self-denial, solitude, and prayer in their pursuit of a closer relationship with God. Christian asceticism derived from the Greek word askesis, meaning exercise or training, was rooted in the belief that true holiness and spiritual purity could only be achieved through rigorous discipline of both body and mind. Early Christian ascetics saw the material world as a realm filled with distractions and temptations that could lead one away from God. In response, they turned away from the comforts and pleasures of everyday life, seeking instead to live in a manner that mirrored the suffering and simplicity of Christ. This ascetic movement was not unique to Christianity. Similar practices were observed in other religious traditions, including Judaism and various Greco-Roman philosophical schools. However, Christian ascetics brought a particular intensity to their practices, often inspired by the teachings of Jesus, who spoke of the difficulty for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven and emphasized the need to take up one's cross in the pursuit of spiritual truth. Among the most famous of these early Christian ascetics were the Desert Fathers and Mothers. These pioneers of the ascetic movement withdrew to the deserts of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine in the 3rd and 4th centuries, seeking to escape the distractions and corruption of urban life. In the wilderness, they dedicated themselves to lives of prayer, fasting, and contemplation. The first of these desert dwellers, such as Anthony the Great, is often considered the father of monasticism. Born into a wealthy Egyptian family, Anthony gave up his inheritance at the age of 20 and retreated into the desert to live a life of solitude. Over the course of his 105 years, Anthony became a living symbol of the ascetic ideal, attracting followers and inspiring countless others to adopt a similar path. His life was marked by extreme austerity. He ate only what was necessary to survive, often fasting for days at a time, and spent his days in prayer and manual labor. His reputation grew, and soon other men and women began to join him in the desert, forming the first monastic communities. These early monks and nuns, known as cenobites, lived together in communal settings with strict rules governing their conduct and spiritual practices. But not all early ascetics sought communal life. Some, like Simeon's Stylites, took their devotion to even more extreme levels. Simeon famously spent 37 years atop a pillar, seeking to be closer to God both physically and spiritually. His example was followed by others who became known as Stylites, and their commitment to asceticism became legendary throughout the Christian world. The teachings and lives of the Desert Fathers and Mothers emphasized virtues such as humility, patience, and love. Their sayings and deeds were recorded in collections like the Apophthegmata Patrum, or Sayings of the Desert Fathers, which became models for later generations of monks and nuns. These early Christian ascetics were seen as living saints, people who had achieved a level of holiness that set them apart from ordinary Christians. The impact of early Christian ascetics extended far beyond their lifetimes. Their commitment to spiritual discipline and the pursuit of holiness laid the foundation for the monastic tradition that would become central to Christian life in the centuries that followed. By the 5th and 6th centuries, monasticism had spread across the Christian world, from the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Gaul and the islands of Ireland. The Rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, formalized many of the practices first developed by the Desert Fathers, providing a blueprint for communal monastic life that balanced prayer, work, and study. Benedict's rule became the standard for monastic communities across Western Europe, shaping the spiritual and intellectual life of the continent for centuries. The early Christian ascetics were instrumental in preserving and transmitting the Christian faith during a period of great turmoil. Their monasteries became centers of learning and culture, safeguarding ancient texts and serving as places of refuge during times of conflict. Moreover, the ascetic ideals of poverty, chastity, and obedience became core virtues in Christian spirituality, influencing not only monastics, but also laypeople who sought to live more devout lives. The influence of early Christian ascetics can still be felt today. The monastic tradition they helped to establish continues to thrive in various forms, from the Benedictine and Cistercian monasteries of the West to the Orthodox monasteries of Mount Athos. Their teachings on prayer, humility, and the renunciation of worldly attachments continue to inspire Christians seeking a deeper, more contemplative faith. As we look back on the lives of these early ascetics, we are reminded of the power of faith and the enduring human quest for spiritual transcendence. Their lives, marked by sacrifice and devotion, offer a glimpse into a form of Christianity that sought to live out the teachings of Christ in the most radical way possible. The early Christian ascetics may have lived in the harshest of environments, but their spiritual legacy continues to nurture and inspire, reminding us that the pursuit of God often leads us into the wilderness, where true transformation can begin. While the Desert Fathers and Mothers are often celebrated as the founders of Christian monasticism, the roots of ascetic practices in early Christianity extend even further back, revealing a diverse and complex landscape of spiritual experimentation. Many early Christian ascetics were inspired not only by the teachings of Jesus, but also by the traditions of Jewish asceticism and the broader philosophical movements of the ancient world. What's fascinating is how these early ascetics often blended these influences to create new and unique forms of devotion. One lesser known fact about early Christian ascetics is their connection to the Essenes, a Jewish sect known for their strict communal living, ascetic practices, and apocalyptic beliefs. The Essenes, who lived in the desert near the Dead Sea, are often considered a precursor to Christian monasticism. Some scholars suggest that the early Christian ascetic movement, particularly in its early Palestinian context, may have been influenced by the Essenes' lifestyle and beliefs. This connection is evident in the emphasis on celibacy, communal living, and the renunciation of material wealth, all of which became central to Christian asceticism. Another interesting aspect of early Christian asceticism is the role of women, who were often at the forefront of the movement. While much attention is given to figures like Anthony the Great and Simeon Stylites, women like Saint Syncletica and Mary of Egypt were equally influential in shaping the ascetic tradition. Syncletica, one of the Desert Mothers, was renowned for her wisdom and spiritual insight. She came from a wealthy Alexandrian family, but chose to live a life of poverty and seclusion in the desert, where she became a spiritual mentor to many women. Her sayings, which emphasize humility, perseverance, and the inner struggle against temptation, have been preserved alongside those of the Desert Fathers. Mary of Egypt's story, though perhaps less known, is particularly compelling. Born in the 4th century, Mary led a life of extreme debauchery before experiencing a profound conversion. According to her hagiography, after attempting to enter a church in Jerusalem and being physically barred from doing so by an unseen force, she repented and fled to the desert, where she lived in complete solitude for 47 years. Her life became a symbol of the transformative power of repentance and the possibility of redemption, no matter how sinful one's past. Another fascinating but less well-known practice among early Christian ascetics was their use of extreme physical austerities, often to the point of self-mortification. While this aspect of asceticism might seem extreme by modern standards, it was seen as a way to discipline the body and focus the mind on spiritual matters. For example, some ascetics practiced prolonged fasting, often eating only a few scraps of bread each day or nothing at all for weeks. Others would sleep on hard floors, wear hair shirts, garments made of rough animal hair worn next to the skin as a form of penance, or expose themselves to extreme weather conditions as a way to mortify the flesh and resist temptations. These practices were not just about punishing the body. They were deeply symbolic acts that reflected the ascetic's desire to transcend the physical world and attain spiritual purity. By subjecting their bodies to such hardships, they believed they could overcome the desires of the flesh and achieve a state of spiritual enlightenment. This concept of bodily discipline was so integral to early Christian asceticism that it even influenced the development of Christian liturgy, where fasting and other forms of physical discipline became central components of religious observance. One particularly intriguing figure is Saint Macarius the Great, an Egyptian monk who was known for his extreme ascetic practices and his deep mystical experiences. Macarius was said to have lived for years in a small cell, where he would allow himself to be bitten by mosquitoes without swatting them away as an act of penance. Despite, or perhaps because of, his harsh lifestyle, Macarius was renowned for his gentle and compassionate nature. He was also known for his profound visions and spiritual experiences, which have been preserved in his writings. These texts, full of mystical insights and allegorical interpretations of Scripture, had a significant influence on later Christian mysticism. Another lesser-known aspect of early Christian asceticism is the practice of voluntary poverty, not just as a means of self-denial, but as a form of radical social protest. Early ascetics like Basil of Caesarea, who is often regarded as one of the most important figures in the development of Christian monasticism, advocated for a life of voluntary poverty as a way to critique the materialism and social inequalities of the time. Basil, who established one of the first organized monastic communities in Asia Minor, emphasized the importance of charity and communal living, where wealth was shared and all members of the community worked together for the common good. This was not just a personal spiritual discipline, but a profound statement against the excesses of the Roman elite and the exploitation of the poor. Interestingly, the ascetic movement also played a role in the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Many early ascetics were highly educated and took it upon themselves to copy and preserve ancient texts, including not only Christian writings, but also works of classical philosophy and science. The monastic scriptoria, where these texts were copied by hand, became centers of learning and scholarship. The dedication of these ascetics to the preservation of knowledge ensured that many important works survived the fall of the Roman Empire and were passed down to future generations. These early ascetics, through their radical lifestyle choices and profound spiritual insights, laid the foundations for the Christian monastic tradition that would flourish in the centuries to come. Their legacy, often overlooked, is not only one of personal holiness, but also one of social transformation and intellectual preservation. As we explore the lives of these remarkable individuals, we uncover a rich tapestry of spiritual devotion, social activism, and cultural continuity that continues to inspire and challenge us today. The legacy of early Christian asceticism is both profound and far-reaching, influencing not only the spiritual landscape of the ancient world, but also shaping the course of Western civilization. As monasticism evolved, it became a powerful force in the preservation of culture, the promotion of education, and the development of social welfare systems across Europe and the Middle East. By the 5th century, monastic communities had become vital centers of learning and culture. The monastic scriptoria were responsible for copying and preserving not only Christian texts, but also important works of classical literature, philosophy, and science. Without the dedication of these early monastics, much of the knowledge from the ancient world might have been lost during the tumultuous periods of the late Roman Empire and the early Middle Ages. These communities also played a crucial role in providing social services, such as caring for the sick, educating the young, and feeding the poor. Monasteries became places of refuge, offering hospitality to travelers and sanctuary to those in need. The early ascetics' commitment to voluntary poverty and communal living evolved into a broader monastic ethos of service and charity that would continue to influence Christian practices for centuries. Moreover, the spiritual teachings of the Desert Fathers and Mothers had a lasting impact on Christian mysticism and theology. Their emphasis on inner spiritual struggle, humility, and the transformative power of prayer deeply influenced later Christian thought, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox and Western Catholic traditions. The writings of these early ascetics, filled with wisdom and spiritual insight, continue to be read and revered by Christians seeking a deeper understanding of their faith. The legacy of early Christian ascetics is a testament to the power of faith and the human spirit's capacity for sacrifice and devotion. Their lives, marked by radical simplicity and profound spiritual commitment, continue to inspire and challenge believers today. As we reflect on their contributions, we are reminded that the pursuit of holiness often requires a journey into the wilderness, both literal and metaphorical, where the soul can be purified and transformed. In conclusion, the early Christian ascetics were more than just isolated figures in the desert. They were pioneers of a movement that would shape the spiritual, cultural, and social fabric of the Christian world for centuries to come. Their enduring influence is a reminder of the deep connections between faith, knowledge, and community that lie at the heart of the Christian tradition.